Yeah, hey, J.R Storment here. I am executive director of the FinOps Foundation. I'm probably gonna have to pat a little bit on the fun fact. I don't normally think of myself as fun, but I live here in San Diego, California. Little bit of background. I've been doing the FinOps thing, air quoting FinOps, for about 15 years, and I'm air quoting it because in the beginning, like the 2010, 2011 era, when I started looking at this space, it was really just like, how do we get efficient use out of AWS resources that we're using? And then over time, obviously, it's evolved into a larger discipline. I started at around that time, was a co-founder of one of the first platforms in the space. At the time was Cloudability. Was at that company for, oh gosh, 8 or 9 years, in a bunch of different roles as co-founder. But when I left post acquisition, that company got acquired by Aptio, which got acquired by IBM. I realized the challenge I really wanted to dig into was not so much the data and technology side, but more about the people, culture, governance as germane to this conversation. But how do you get engineers to think and care about cost, and how do you get finance people to understand just how different cloud models are? And so started the foundation with a set of about 26 early practitioners, and in 2020 moved over to the foundation full time. So myself and my team work at the Linux Foundation, and we're a small remote team. We got about 30 people supporting the FinOps Foundation globally, but our 30 people are actually in 7 countries, so we're extremely remote for such a small team. And yeah, really excited to be here. And Umair, congrats on the new book that you guys published recently, and I'm really honored to be here, to be able to speak after such luminaries as Kelsey. So very cool. Oh, and a fun fact. Oh boy, I actually dropped out of school at 18 because I decided the two things I really cared about doing were computers and business. And the best ways for me to learn computers and business was to get stuck into it. So left school, started building firms, and at the time it was the 90s, so websites and e-commerce stuff, and just kind of never looked back, just kept going, jumping around different areas. But yeah, took a different path, and been really happy with where I landed. So always like to talk about ways that we come to these places, because I feel like particularly in FinOps as a discipline, there's like a lot of different paths that people take to get here. So yeah, great to be here and looking forward to the conversation.
Wow, I did not know that, but I did know about cloudability. And what's interesting is I think 2 presentations before you had people using cloudability, and were using custodian for action and cloudability for identification of things. So I think a lot of people
Yeah.
know cloudability here. So maybe they did not know you were one of the co-founders or the co-founder.
Well, I was one of 3 co-founders. Yeah, so we 3 guys with 3 laptops in a co-working space in 2010, 2011, and then grew it from there. Did the whole grow the company and go through acquisition journey, and then yeah, ended up at the larger company afterwards. Did my year, and then left to do the foundation.
Right. I know Kelsey is still on, but I asked him a question too, like what did he think about FinOps? And but I think we require an official definition for FinOps, because a lot of people on this call are from cloud engineering who are listening as well. Some already know about FinOps, have maybe become FinOps engineers. Some are FinOps practitioners as well. So we have a nice mix of attendance. So just to set the level set for people who don't know about the FinOps Foundation or FinOps as a profession, how would you describe it to them in a minute or two?
Yeah, good question. Oh gosh, I'm going to separate the two, like what the foundation is versus what is FinOps. I'll say what I think engineers a few years ago historically would think about what FinOps is. They're like, FinOps is that team with that annoying right sizing report that's chasing me to do things that I don't have time for. That's sort of like the I think where this stuff started. I think what in the shortest version, I think what FinOps is about, and we'll get to how it's done well versus not, and when it's an engineering versus not, when it's proactive versus reactive. But the shortest version is it's about getting the most value out of your cloud resources or your cloud historically, but has become, and I picked up a little bit of the end of Kelsey's talk, I think at the beginning, but has become, how do you get the most value out of your cloud-like things? And I say cloud-like things because cloud-like includes your SaaS, your software. Increasingly, a lot of companies are running their data centers on-prem in a more cloud-like way, where they're trying to look at being more cognizant and aware of consumption, and also trying to be better about their planning of investments based on actual usage. So FinOps has, I think, really evolved in the last 5 or 6 years from being that sort of retroactive cost reporting layer to being, at the companies who are doing it well, a function that lives in the technology organization, that enables basically better conversations using data to make trade-off decisions about value of the technology. So that's like, how do we get the engineers talking to the finance people, talking to the business people, to make decisions about what we're going to build now in a proactive fashion, how we're going to build it, how we're going to deploy it, and how we make sure we're getting value out of that. The other short version there throughout is it's not about saving money. Often FinOps is about investing more in technology, but it's about providing accountability, visibility, and the ability to make those trade-off decisions. FinOps Foundation has been around for about 5 or 6 years. Yeah, part of the Linux Foundation. So we're a sister organization to the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. I think we're about the second largest program by a few different measures now in the Linux Foundation. And yeah, our mission is, unlike a lot of the Linux Foundation, which focuses on open source code, we focus on advancing people. So we do that through open source frameworks, yes, but a lot of it is community and education and culture and training and getting the people understanding, to the point of engineers, getting engineers to think about cost as an NFR, getting engineers to think about cost as a first-class citizen alongside other areas, and enabling people to advance their careers as they go in this field, whether they be engineers or FinOps practitioners or procurement or business or finance or any of the constellation of things that touch FinOps.
Yeah, no, that's great. I did share a link to the FinOps Foundation. I'm personally a big fan. I think the work that FinOps Foundation is doing is great, and busting myths as well around it's more than about cloud saving. It's all about value and collaboratively working across different teams. I know that's some of the misconceptions that people get, but I think the foundation is doing a great job in bursting those myths as well. So on that part, let's talk about you guys do a State of FinOps report every year. I'll share the link to the one that happened earlier in the year, and I know the new one is coming as well. Probably the research starts right now. And one of the things that we notice, and we have a self-precision because of Custodian and Stacklet, is we see waste reduction and workload optimization was #1 priority for the last couple of years. But now in the next 12 months, at least 6 months ago, FinOps governance became a priority too, right? Maybe it's because the waste keeps coming back. And that was one of the reasons that we wanted you to have a keynote too. And we have seen Custodian as well. Traditionally, we had a lot of tagging, compliance, security use cases. But I would say in the last 2 years, a lot of FinOps teams are engaging with us for FinOps-based use cases as well, because it seems like governance is becoming a priority for them, right? So what's driving this shift of going from one-time optimizations to having something like continuous governance in place?
Yeah, I mean, I think the aspect of eliminating waste is kind of just a perennial concern that's going to be there. But that shift to governance, and in the State of FinOps data, that specifically was, and I think it's interesting to note, I think it was that right now people are most focused on that waste optimization side. And in the next 12 months, they're going to be focused on governance. That is kind of a good news and bad news. The bad news, I think that means, is that people are still firefighting a lot, and they want to get to a place where they're more proactive, right? They want to get to that place. Those are their plans. But I think one of the reasons that the idea of governance, I'm going to air quotes a lot during this talk, clearly, governance is a thing, is becoming higher and higher importance, is that FinOps is moving left in the development cycle, earlier in the product and business conversations, and it's also moving up the organizational stack. Whereas historically, there was like a FinOps team that's focused just in cloud, or there's an engineer who's got FinOps as a side hustle, or there's like a little thing focused on cloud, and cloud is being treated differently than a lot of the rest of the technology spend, and it's not as critical to business. A lot of large companies now, the cloud spend is big enough, and FinOps has expanded into other areas, that it's becoming a conversation that happens at a CIO level about hey, we're going to go build these things, or CTO, depending on the company, we're going to go build these things next year. We need to start having these conversations about cost trade-offs and considering technology choices. Or we're looking at this big multi-year investment with our cloud, or are going to do some on-prem. How do we use our data centers? We're going to use this data cloud or this platform. We need to bring the cost conversation and the value trade-off conversation higher up in the organization and earlier in the design process, so that we're not ending up in a place historically where we were, which was, dang it, we deployed this thing into insert your cloud, AWS, Google, Microsoft, Oracle, whatever, and it was more expensive than we thought. We need to fix it. We're getting ahead of that with good architecture, and then we're getting ahead of wasteful decisions with cost avoidance instead of cleanup after the fact. So I think it's an evolution of people seeing, kind of where I mentioned earlier, cost as a first-class citizen and a non-functional requirement of product design, and for engineering teams to also start to bake it into part of their job descriptions.
Yeah. So do you think governance makes FinOps sustainable? I heard somebody use that term as well. Like people are trying to make FinOps more sustainable. How should they prioritize governance initiatives? What are some of the best practices you would share, and how would you guide them as well?
And for the context on that, was it sustainable in terms of sustaining the practice, or sustainability in terms of carbon and related metrics?
Sustainable to practice, not...
Okay. Because I think those two are related, obviously, and slightly different takes there, but go either direction. So sustainability of the practice, I think, is interesting. I will go back to that, like, not about saving money moniker or maxim that I use a lot, which is too often when people are starting FinOps practices or starting the initiative or building a team or whatever it is, they focus on that cost savings and waste reduction aspect, which looks good and feels good when they initially achieve that. But over time, you move out of finding like really obvious waste and into just operating more efficiently, which is about, tightening up your processes. It's about getting it as part of engineering sprints. And as I mentioned, product design life cycles and all these things. And so there's a big shift that has to happen within the FinOps team or teams, or whether it be embedded or standalone, to essentially get to a place where, you're still taking out waste, but you're ultimately talking more about value. You're talking about unit economics. You're talking about providing the right data to the right people at the right times to make better decisions, and really getting where you're supporting the board level conversation, which is happening, where the board at your company or the CEO is saying that we're going to go into these new markets, going to try and tighten up margins here. We're going to do, whatever that high level view is, that then they're able to take those requirements down, translate them out to the data, the views, the scopes, whatever the teams need, so that on a daily basis, they're making decisions that sometimes might decide to use less, sometimes might decide to use more, but ultimately are focused on getting the value out of the technology to tackle that top level concern that's coming down. And so I think governance is sort of a natural progression of that, right? Moving from, you can be ad hoc in this, which is put data in the hands of the engineer and the path of the engineer, and they should make better decisions, but they also need guidance about what's important right now. And, you hear through the manifestation of AI and all the things happening, like for AI projects, we talk to, SVP, EVP engineering leaders, and they're like, I'm being told to green light everything, right? And go fast and deliver customer impact. And we've got these crazy product goals, and we think it's going to have impact on all these areas. I'm being told not to worry about cost for my AI, areas, whether it be agentic or whatever I'm doing. But for my historical business as usual cloud that's running, this standalone system, I need to be tighter on margins, and I need to give my my engineering teams and my guidance around how we're going to actually act day to day with that data. Now on that AI side, though, even though they're thinking go fast, deliver more value, they're also really worried about forecasting the cost and figuring out where it's going to land and understanding the impact of it hitting production and all the variables around the prompts that people put in, and whether we need to bring in caching, and looking at the new models as they land. And so the aspect of governance is not just about, I think, locking things down and saying controlling what you're doing. It's about taking that guidance from the top about what the company's trying to accomplish, putting that into data that has context, so that engineers at the end can make the decision they need based on the context from the top down, the data they're getting, and also with the other myriad of delivery goals they have around shipping features and keeping things performant, reliable.
Like a lot of the talks early in the day were AI centric too. Like a couple of after this as well. I think the need of guardrails in an AI world, like everybody's hearing the same thing, like, hey, we need to get this AI project out, but the cost of a mistake is too high, right? So I think we've seen somehow more people prioritize some of the things like Capital One early in the day presented how they're doing FinOps for Bedrock using Custodian, right? So putting in the right guardrails so they don't get security bills around that time frame. So I think it's a nice, interesting time, especially in the age of AI as well. So as people try to scale their governance programs, and I almost feel like in on the security side, there are a lot of places like CIS and NIST and all these things. But on the finance side, from a governance standpoint, people are still trying to grow governance to scale across programs, right? Like an automation plays a key role, tools like Custodian play a key role, policies play a key role. What would be your guidance to people who are trying to scale FinOps governance across the organization? And I liked in your question in the research too, the priority was not implement FinOps governance program, but was to implement FinOps governance at scale. So what would you recommend to people like who are trying to scale their governance program in terms of FinOps usage and stuff?
Yeah, I mean, FinOps can't operate in a vacuum in the organization. You can't have a person who says, here's what we're going to do in FinOps because I think it's the right thing to do. It's got to take contextual information from the top, like I've been talking about. But then it also has to factor in all the other things happening across the organization. I think, governance to me almost automatically implies some centralization, which is that somebody is deciding how other people are going to operate. I think that to do FinOps well at scale and to implement the right governance as well, you also have to be careful that the governance is not about guardrails as much as it is about enablement. And certain projects, certain teams are going to have those tight, restrictive guardrails. And others, you need to be able to enable them to run faster, to make better decisions, and to choose to use the more expensive thing as needed. So I think the at scale question becomes one of how do you enable flexibility in the right places and get the inputs about like where are we willing to give and where are we not willing to give. So it has to be, as people ask, where's FinOps report? Well, it's almost, I would say, the vast majority of practices that are scaled and at big companies, it reports into a technology function. There are some that report into a finance function. It doesn't really matter where they report. It's got to be a dotted line matrix conversation about, like, what are we trying to accomplish with the technology in relation to the business goals? And what are our financial constraints, like literally around cash or how we need to account or report to the street? And so the success there is bringing those together in a conversation, right, that balances those things, enables that context for everybody, and then the flexibility to give this team we're going to do this team we're going to do this team we're going to do this. So, I mean, I think it's the unfortunate news with all FinOps stuff and culture and governance is it's a long process, I think, to get it right. It is, I hate the term, but it's a transformation in an organization. And although FinOps needs to be led by engineering can't do it alone. Engineering can't own, you can't have just FinOps as a thing that engineers do. Well, engineers have a certain set of things they own, but there's other parts of the business that to feed in. So it has to be a cross-functional conversation that is facilitated across either those leaders or via FinOps practice or practitioner or dedicated, sort of person on those teams. So it's a tough challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. So it seems like there's a lot of people aspect to FinOps governance as well, in terms of buy-in and education and that kind of stuff.
The people part is huge. I think it's not just people, but it's making sure that people have aligned incentives for the work that they're doing. Like if I think about one of my favorite talks from the FinOps X conference a couple of years ago was from an engineer who was at Apple at the time. And he was talking about how one of the best ways to get engineers fired up about, cost and bringing it in was to start thinking about it as a new constraint to their process, which enables them to go solve a new, harder problem. Because anybody can throw money at a hard technical challenge, right? And use a large number of resources or the most expensive thing to do so. But if you start to think about cost and constraints as a really interesting non-functional requirement that requires more engineering creativity, it requires more innovation, it requires more thinking, you can continue to tick the box of enabling engineers to solve hard problems that they want to do, but also align to the company goals, right? So part of that is governance and technology. Part of it is cultural, like celebration, where the engineering leadership, the technology leadership is like saying, this is important. We're celebrating those who are not just good at architecture, or velocity, or reliability, or scale, but we're celebrating those who are good at cost efficiency as well. And that becomes part of engineering ladders, right, for promotion. It becomes part of the work. It becomes part of sprints. And we're setting aside time in sprints for points that look at this. So we're not doing this reactive quarterly or every 6-month cycle where we're going, oh, SHIT, the CFO is pissed at us because we're blowing the budgets. We've baked in an ongoing muscle, if you will, for doing this work.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think naturally, this is a cloud custodian, how do you see tools like Cloud Custodian and open source communities helping with these initiatives, FinOps Foundation being open source as well? If you can share a bit more than that.
Yeah, well, it's funny because we were having this conversation, it occurred to me that I think Cloud Custodian might need to rebrand, because custodian implies someone who just cleans up the mess after the fact when everybody's left the building, right? But really, I think the power of tools like Custodian is that it's in the flow, it's in the work, it's like doing it as it goes, it's keeping things neat and tidy and clean right as you go versus doing the cleanup later. At the large companies, the FinOps work can't be done manually, right? And over time, even at smaller companies, you don't want it to be something that someone has to remember to do or has to pull out of their backlog to prioritize. So I think this idea of whether it be, tools that do it pre-deployment, during deployment, after the fact, in an automated and programmatic fashion are really, really key. The big debate, I think, from day one in the FinOps community, though, as well, has been, can't we just automate all this away? And it's like, there's a set of these things that I think you can, and finding silly examples of like finding unused snapshots or like storage lifecycle decisions or whatever the thing is, it's clearly waste. Yeah, that's there, but there's a larger aspect that will require some human inputs, nuance, and conversation, right? About, well, do we want to have this extra amount of air quotes waste that sits there because it's important for some other business reason during that time? And so while I think the tooling is critical as in there, the tooling has to be informed obviously by the business decisions and priorities. And that is where the cross-functional human conversation comes in.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I know we have a few more minutes left or behind, but if there is any audience questions, you can type them in the chat window right now. Any question that anybody else has, because I hogged up a lot of time for JR, but this was great, JR. Thank you so much for doing this.
I like the proposed rename of Cloud Custodian. There's a Cloud Companion. Is it something like that?
There was a very positive shout out to FinOpsX as well. I think Evan from EA mentioned that's one of the best conferences he's ever been to. So kudos to you. I can attest to that too. Definitely one of the best conferences I've been to, just because of the quality of the content and everything there as well. Mike says +1 too. So a lot of FinOps people in
hey, Mike.
community as well. And then
that's amazing.
And how can people be part of the FinOps Foundation? How for people who are new to it? Like I was already talking to a couple of presenters who are coming up next. Not Adam from AWS, who's already part of it, but there were others. They were like, oh, what is FinOps Foundation? I am a cloud engineer that does the cleanup. So technically I'm a FinOps engineer. So what's your guidance?
Yeah. Well, I guess going back to kind of where I started with my introduction, like I'm a startup guy, despite the fact that I work at a big nonprofit. And so like I say that to say like we're highly, highly sensitive and we want to respond to feedback and evolving trends in the market. And I think my team was frustrated the first couple of years that things keep changing. And I'm like, yeah, they keep changing because the market keeps evolving so quickly. I bring all that up to say that the best way to the point of like FinOps X or any of these things is like, give us feedback about what you want to see at the conference next year. Like the call for proposals is open right now. And there's been some great people on here, like, Mike Graff has spoken there before. Hey, there's Frank. Hey, Frank. So give us feedback on that, come to the virtual summits, come to the community calls, like get engaged and give back. Because the foundation puts out like framework best practices, and we put out specifications for, cloud billing, like the focus spec. But I always tell people that the foundation is kind of like a gym membership. You get out of it what you put in, and if you just walk by your gym or look in the window, you know, you're not going to get much out. But if you're in there on the treadmill, lifting the weights, and you know, contributing in a working group or sharing your stories, that's where you're going to get the most out of it. So I think, you know, show up and learn in the beginning, but then plan to keep showing up and contributing, because that's where you're gonna
Yeah,
get FinOps fit.
it definitely feels like I can even say about open source as well. People feel like open source is about using systems for free, but if you really want to get like the best out of open source community, I'm going to steal your tagline too. Like it's like a membership to a gym. The
Yeah.
more you work out, the more you do stuff, the better you get, more you get out of the community as well.
If you go twice a year, you're going to set of results. If you go every week, you're going to get a different set, right? And hey, Bindu, great example of Bindu there in the chat. She's been huge contributor in leading working groups for us over the years. So I hope Bindu's gotten a lot out of it as a result.
Yeah, perfect. So we are right at time, JR. Thank you so much for your time. I hope everybody learned. I hope you get like 20, 30 more people in your Slack channel today, just from this, like last year. But you know, looking forward to collaborating with you. Stacklet is a premium member too. Custodian is part of CNCF, which you know JR explained is part of the same umbrella foundation. So there's a big Cloud Custodian Slack within FinOps as well. And thank you for sharing, JR. He's very approachable. Like you can literally Slack him if you're on that Slack as well. So just reach out. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Amir. Really pleasure. Great to see so many familiar faces and familiar red glasses. See you later.
Take care.
Thank you.